I love Hawkeye. Go ahead, call me a little old Marvel fanboy, but I read the Matt Fraction Hawkeye comic book run when it first came out in 2012, and I've been waiting at least that long for an MCU property that properly focuses on Christmas. And putting those two things together, by the way, if you don't know, this whole series was pretty heavily inspired by the 2012 to 2015 Matt Fraction run on Hawkeye in the comics, is fucking tight. However, before I geek out too much on all things Marvel, too late, way too late for that, we should talk about the major Easter egg hiding right in front of us. And this is a pretty simple place to look for an Easter egg. If you're ever looking at a TV show or a film and you want to find like the hidden things in there, the number one place to go is a list of names. Anytime you see a list of names popping up, it's likely that there's some kind of inspiration behind it, and that goes double in the MCU where almost everything leads somewhere. So what's up with this list of names, which incidentally can be seen in Hawkeye episode 2? It's the list of people living in the apartment block that Kate's aunt lives in, where she hides out with Lucky the pizza dog. I'm sorry, I said I know I wouldn't freak out. The list itself is actually a very simple, and if you're not a major Marvel Comics nerd, unimportant Easter egg. The list of names, most of it, is filled with famous comic book writers, including Sam Moskowitz, Marcel Souza, Glenn Danzig. There's a whole lot on there. This in itself isn't a major thing, it isn't really leading anywhere, but it was kind of interesting to pick up on. However, the much more plain, in-your-face, important Easter egg is the one hiding not at all. It's right there in the middle of the screen. Moira Brandon, the name whose apartment they actually head into. Let me explain a couple things to you about this old Hollywood actress, because not only is she that, pretty snazzy dresser judging by what Kate finds in her apartment, she's also an Avenger? November 1993. Avengers West Coast Volume 2, Issue 100. You know, when I say things like that, it really feels like this is a whole religion, like I'm reading out a biblical passage or something. Maybe I am. Anywho, the West Coast Avengers was one of the many Marvel Comics groups that have popped up throughout the years to replace or just add to the main Avengers team in the Marvel 616 universe. However, of the various spin-off teams throughout history, the West Coast Avengers was the first to come together in response to the Avengers chairman Vision, long story, wanting to expand the influence of the team. To be fair, a lot of Marvel Comics and MCU action is centered on a general New York area, so it would be a pretty seismic shift to go to LA. So November 1993, the only issue of a Marvel comic that Moira Brandon has ever appeared in. Strange, isn't it? Aging movie star, bitter about her old career, but nothing villainous about her, no obvious powers to speak of. What's so special about her? Well, when Avengers West Coast team leader Hawkeye, you see where I'm going with this now, right? And his wife at the time, Mockingbird, not relevant to our current situation since she appeared in Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. and probably isn't turning up anymore. They were looking for a new Avengers headquarters in California and decided to buy out the mansion of this aging movie star who'd been chucked out of Hollywood with the advent of talkies because she smoked 20 ciggies a day and her voice sounded like shit. Think Norma Desmond in Sunset Boulevard. She was just this randomly introduced character. There was nothing at all special about her. How am I making a 10-minute video out of this? Because it matters? Maybe? While at Moira Brandon's mansion, Hawkeye and Mockingbird were attacked by the villainous Crossfire, and they were at his mercy until cheeky old Moira found a crossbow that Crossfire had discarded earlier, and she just absolutely walloped him with it. She was unfortunately injured in the skirmish, and Hawkeye thanked her for helping them by making her an honorary West Coast Avenger. That's right, only appeared in one issue of one comic book in all of history, and yet, she's an Avenger. And you guys were getting all excited about Echo being introduced. And you should, but this video isn't about that. So Moira is an Avenger, but more importantly than that, she has a huge historical link to the West Coast Avengers and Hawkeye. Now let's imagine, because it seems likely, that the Hawkeye show leads to a proper retirement for Clint Barton. It's been teased as far back as Age of Ultron. The man's exhausted by this point, going deaf, just wants to be at home with his family, and it would be a nice parallel for both Clint and Natasha to get sent off into the sunset after having a Phase 4 project they actually get to headline. So if there was a Season 2 of Hawkeye to come, it would likely be focusing on Kate Bishop, because just like Natasha, Clint is leaving at the perfect time to leave behind a great successor. Whoa, that's fun. And I mean, Kate's had a bit of trouble recently, not just destroying the Steen Tower, as in Obadiah Steen, at her college campus, but also just getting involved in mafia goings-on, murder investigations, generally pissing off her mom, all in New York City. That's weird, isn't it? Maybe if she was to keep going with these superhero shenanigans, she would have to move on to a different coast. Now, I've talked in the past about the strong possibility of Kate Bishop being a leading member of a young Avengers team in the MCU, and with the roster of various potential candidates for such a team really having filled out over the last year, it seems like a sure bet that Avengers 5 is going to be some sort of a mix between Young Avengers and West Coast Avengers. It's a younger tilting team that is the first spin-off. What a perfect amalgamation. There are a few other interesting bits of points in the opening 3 episodes that kind of tease this could be happening. I'm not just jumping crazily to that conclusion based on a Marvel Comics Easter egg to a story from 30 years ago. I probably would have made the video even if these other bits of evidence weren't there, though. Big Jack, who is about to meet Clint as we enter episode 4 of the show and has already had a bit of a fencing competition with Kate, is the MCU version of J'accuse, also known, unsurprisingly, as the Swordsman. Now, that villainous character is notable as it means Jack, as we suspected from his interactions with Kate, is hiding some pretty impressive fencing abilities, but also because of the comic book Kate Bishop's first time fighting with the Young Avengers came in. The character of Kate Bishop was actually introduced in Young Avengers issue 1. The first time she appeared in any comic book ever was the first time the Young Avengers did. Of all the characters, including the ones who officially joined the team before her, nobody's fate throughout Marvel history has been linked to the team like Kate's has. Originally, she followed the team after being seen as a normal civilian during their first attempt at mission, and after following them to Avengers HQ, she stole gear, including pieces belonging to Clint Barton and Mockingbird, and a sword, which is long suspected to have previously been owned by the Swordsman. So you could say that Jack's sword, you know, the one that he stole from the auction after the Tracksuit Mafia broke in because he wanted it so badly, you could say that if somehow by the end of this show that sword ended up in Kate's hands, that Haley Steinfeld would be looking an awful lot like the Kate Bishop we met joining the Young Avengers for her first run in the comics. Of course, we do have to get rid of Clint, and how is he ever going to feel safe about leaving Kate behind? Maybe if this team was to form quicker than you can imagine. Yeah. Interesting that we're getting an Echo show on Disney Plus after all of this, since she seems to be villainous. What if she reforms? What if she wants to go after Kingpin? It's definitely Kingpin. Her uncle, it's definitely Kingpin. We know this already, okay? We've been talking about Charlie Cox coming back as Daredevil. We know Kingpin's coming back. Vincent D'Onofrio was so good. Also, Kingpin raised Echo in the comics. I mean, come on. Okay, no, just okay. That's not the point. The point is that she's probably going to reform because she's getting her own show. Duh. And that would, if she became friends with Kate Bishop, I can imagine Clint feeling happy to finally go home and live happy in retirement, with his family. Especially if Yelena Belova was also involved. What's that you say? Yeah, how about that? Yelena Belova. Young version of Black Widow, young version of Hawkeye, making the Young Avengers team. Sounds sensible to me. They always had a special bond. Why wouldn't the younger versions of them have a special bond? And speaking of friends she could use to start a Young Avengers team, she's already got one. It probably won't come to anything, but it's too tantalizing not to mention that in episode 1, Kate is seen destroying the Steen Bell Tower after some sort of bet or dare, and 2 friends of hers are there while she does it. Now, one of them was called Franny, and I mean, the closest thing I could find in Marvel Comics history to a Franny is a couple of Franceses, one notable one in particular, but it doesn't seem to lead anywhere. The other is called Greer, and that's a fairly uncommon name, but matches Greer Grant, who in Marvel Comics becomes Tigra. Now, don't let me get too far into how she became imbued with the soul of one of the cat people, that's the whole thing. But before that, she worked as a costumed vigilante known as the Cat. Is it unlikely she's going to turn up and become a Young Avenger with Kate? Sure. I mean, there was no focus on her at all, and the actress playing her hasn't been enough to make me suspicious that Marvel have cast her with a larger role than that cameo scene in mind. But alongside her allegiances to various factions and Avengers teams over the years, since her inception in the comics, it is worth noting that Tigra was a pretty prominent member of the West Coast Avengers. I should finally make the point that whether it's a West Coast team or a young team, the MCU needs a new Avengers. That's too important not to have around. And if you want my 2 cents on the matter, which at this point in the video I'm guessing you do, they should feel a little underdog. They should feel a little renegade. They shouldn't feel like a giant focused team. If you put together a team that's got Hulk, Captain Marvel, Doctor Strange, sure, it would be able to deal with any earthbound threats. Maybe a little bit too easily. But if you took a team that consisted of Kate Bishop's Hawkeye trying desperately to lead Yelena Belova, maybe Cassie Lang, maybe Tigra, maybe Echo, that sounds like they could struggle against some serious earthbound threats, while everybody else's matters, the Eternals, the Guardians, even the whatever's going on in the Shang-Chi post-credit scene, they're probably more focused on outside of Earth. And it would be interesting to have a team that does feel smaller. Feels like a friendly neighborhood situation, if you know what I mean. We know that there's more Tom Holland Spider-Man films coming, just saying. Strange to have the opportunity to put together a young team, a new team, a spin-off team, and dare I say it, after what we've talked about in this video, a female team of Avengers and not do it. Especially when you've got 4 potential, even strong candidates for membership showing up in the same TV show at the same time. I'm just saying, that would be a pretty interesting bit of movie magic. Holy shit. I do love talking about Hawkeye and all other things Marvel, and I imagine we're going to talk about Spider-Man No Way Home when it comes out, and then talk about Hawkeye when the show actually ends. It's going to be a lot. let me know other theories, outside of Marvel even, that you guys want to see talked about on the channel, because I don't know. There's a lot of weird ones out there. I'll explore some weird shit. Let's go for it. Also subscribe.